Hey everyone, what is up? My name is Exit over here, and this is my review for Star Trek Discovery Season 2, Episode 5, Saints and Imperfection. There's going to be huge spoilers for the episode from this point on. So, sorry that yet another one of my Star Trek reviews is really late. I feel like none of them have been on time. So this episode of Discovery was kind of interesting, but I'll be honest, I don't know if it was good interesting or bad interesting. For one, this episode kind of changed Christopher Pike in a way I don't really like. This episode involved a whole lot of Section 31 shenanigans, and thus Ash Tyler finally made his return to the Discovery. So far, for some reason, the whole time Ash was on the ship, Pike felt like a need to be kind of a dick to him, and for no real reason either, because he was a Klingon I guess, or because he was Section 31. Either way, for Pike to be just so cold towards Ash really wasn't in line with the Pike we've come to know over the past 4 episodes. It really left a pretty sour taste in my mouth. Pike is supposed to be this guy who always gives somebody the benefit of the doubt. I even believe that he actually had a line earlier this season when he said he judges people on their actions and not what he hears about them, and all that. Ash did practically nothing in this episode, so there were no actions for Pike to judge Ash on. It was a little disheartening to see since so far Pike has been written superbly and in line with everything we've heard or seen about him in prior canon. Speaking of Ash, besides being someone for Pike to snarl at, he didn't get an awful lot to do this episode. He's back on Discovery, which is nice, he looks fucking badass, and he's one of my favourite characters on the show, so it's good to see him back in the forefront. But to be honest, his arc this episode was just moving him from point A, which was Leland's ship, to point A, which is the Discovery. It's also interesting because Section 31 seemingly wants somebody who works for them on board Discovery, and with absolutely no one wanting Joe on board, this responsibility falls to Ash, which will presumably create a lot more situations where Pike and Ash butt heads. This episode really had a lot to do with Section 31, that was kind of the theme of the episode. The trailer for the episode seemed to imply this would mostly be about rescuing Tilly from the Mycelium network, when in actuality, that was mainly to have a plot surrounding the episode that could bring Section 31 to showing up at Discovery's location, and make it believable. It's also interesting to note that Leland and Pike go way back, and with even back in the day, Leland being morally grey, while Pike was always the hopeful optimist that Starfleet idealizes. Georgiou shows back up on Discovery, having commandeered Spock's shuttle, giving us yet another episode tiptoeing over around seeing Spock. Like seriously, it was announced he was in the season about a year and a half back. He was pretty prominent in the trailers, and one of the first official pictures released for this season was of him. Hell, out of the 3 character posters released, he was one of them. So why in the fricking frick are we almost halfway through the season and no closer to seeing him show up? I really thought by episode 2 or 3 at the latest, we'd have Spock around. Unfortunately, with next episode looking to focus on Saru's planet, which is cool in its own right, it seems we'll have another episode of not seeing Spock. The Mycelium network stuff was pretty interesting, and it looks like we may be done with that plot, which I can't say I'm choked up about. May and that whole thing was definitely my least favourite parts of the season thus far. That said, this episode did some interesting stuff, and the sequences of Discovery being sucked into the network, with Leland's ship having to save them, had some of the best visuals not just in Star Trek history, but honestly in movie or TV media I can remember. It was stunning, the music was great, and everything just seemed to be so high quality. If we saw more of that more often, it really would up the show in my opinion. But it also looked hella expensive, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's a few episodes before we see something even half as good looking as those scenes again due to budget issues. We also got the return of Hugh Culber from last season, who died from Klingon Tyler snapping his neck around episode 10ish, I believe. It's revealed that Stamets basically absorbed his consciousness into the network, and he's been being hunted by mycelium monsters inside the network ever since. I was happy to see him back in the show. His and Hugh's back and forth last season was definitely a highlight, and I thought his story was cut short far too soon, so I'm really interested to see where his story goes from here and what kind of PTSD he'll be dealing with since coming back. Some stray thoughts I had, so it was cool to see Admiral Cornwall back for the first time since last season. It was nice to see her have to calm both Leland and Pike down when they couldn't get along. One problem I have with all the Section 31 stuff is that it seems to be pretty common knowledge that Section 31 exists. Like, everyone knows who they are. In Deep Space Nine, which is about 120 years after this, nobody knows who they are, and they couldn't get any more secretive if they tried. Michael's speech throughout the episode was really nice, and the Red Angels being the Iconians theory is getting slightly more likely, as we had the whole thing about the red signals possibly relating to time travel. For example, with the Iconians' main thing being gates that let people time travel, this kind of lines up with what we learned about the red signals kind of can manipulate time. So overall, this episode definitely had a bunch of things to like and enjoy. The visuals were spectacular, Ash looks badass, and having Q back is nice. But the main plots of the episode revolved around some of the most uninteresting aspects of the season thus far, in my opinion. It also doesn't help that these recent episodes are feeling more and more like stalling until the show finally can introduce Spock. I would love more episodes like last week or episode 2 of the crew finding a new planet or whatnot that they have to investigate and deal with it over dealing with an uninteresting plot that was just built up 2 episodes prior. It just feels like the deeper we get into the season, the less enthusiastic about it I am. During episodes 1 and 2, it really felt like things were going in a new, unique direction. I could get behind, you know? Now, it just feels more of what season 1 was. So this episode is a 6 out of 10 in my opinion. Yeah, so I was just going to keep this short and sweet since it's already late enough as it is. But thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you, and have a great day.